Okay, recording is get started. I think let's get started too. Welcome to the fifth session of the automation training. Uh, Today we are going to talk about mainly the different scenarios of deployment and then architecture, how we have built this Luma automation, little bit of architecture, deployment architecture mainly, and also we will cover the what is coming up in the feature release. That means the roadmap items, what we think should be. This I hope it should be interactive. So we need to get your feedback. If you have tried something, you would know the feedback. I did hear a couple of them did try to create some workflows and then was not successful later. They might have been successful for now. So we would like to hear some feedback on the roadmap items and also on the automation overall. Okay, let's not just waste much time. Let's get started. Let me share my screen. So we are going to cover the session 5. I think this is what the deployment on-premise, SaaS, and hybrid. These are the three options we have from deployment perspective. We are going to cover in detail. And also we were going to discuss on the roadmap items. What are the items which we have planned, and then a little bit details on each of them. So just to give a recap on what we have going to cover, what we have covered till now. I think if you know, these are the key components for the automation. So automation requires the application apps needs to be created, and then apps can be of two types: Mule connector app and REST connector app. And then REST connector apps will have instances where we can configure where to run. Similarly, Mule connector has got agent, so where we can deploy the agents and then how the agent configuration would run on that particular agent. So that's how the differences between the Mule and REST connector, where we have instances and then the execution endpoints. Then we also have workflow triggers, how we can use the APIs provided by automation to incorporate them into ITSM system. So that's what currently we have done it for Luma VA. It would be going forward with the rest of the other ITSM tools too. Then we did cover what are the things required to build a workflow, mainly the prerequisites, how you need to plan prior to building the actual workflow, what are the steps required to identify what are the flow, what are the items required for the flow. Take example of like creating a user. I need the user's first name, last name, title, location, all those details would need to be captured. So those are the input parameters which would need to be configured. When you look at the operation, you would get most of the required fields, whatever the dollar variables over there would become my input parameters. So you need to define the input parameter at the workflow level and then map them at the task level or the operation level. So that's what we're the designing part would become. So while creating the workflow operations, you define the workflow operations, define the input parameter at the workflow level, map them at the operation level. Once you have designed the complete workflow, you would test and then trigger the workflow. So triggering the workflow, you can use the automation itself to trigger, and then if you have configured to trigger from external system like Luma or other system, you can trigger them using the REST API call. So then we also talked about the different elements, design elements, like the gateway component. This is to branch out the options. We will use this gateway component on successful completion of the previous step. For example, if I here for this example, if I get channel account ID, if that ID is exist, then send notification. If no, send an email. That means I'm getting an ID here after the ID successful generation of the successful response from the API call, then only I will be able to branch that out. So in case if I'm not able to successfully get the call itself completed, so those scenarios is where the error boundary or error handling events are used. So these are mainly to handle the technical error part. We also you can be used for business error, like the one which we saw the previous step. So in case if I want to use this as a business condition, that would also be possible over there. But ideally, you would use the gateway for the successful one. And in case of any error handling the technical issues or the API errors, you would use the error handling event. So that's what we covered those, and also how you can configure or create your own error codes to branch the workflow to run on different path to take the different paths to the flow. And then on success, we can configure same thing. Also, we saw the different integrations you can create. That's what this is the important part, how you create different apps, mainly the REST app and then the Mule app. So we did a session on creating the REST app where we created the change gear app on the fly, and then how easy it was to create the app. And also we did look at the Mule app. So REST apps, what is required, the endpoints to third-party application, connectivity and authentication information. These are all standard configuring the REST app. It would be similar to you already got familiarity with creating the apps in Luma VA virtual agent. So it could be somewhat similar, but only difference here, you would also need the inputs to the flow so that you would configure the operation properly with the inputs. Then same thing can be configured in the workflow. So those are the little differences between the apps in two different applications, but overall the concept of apps and instance operations are all same between the two applications. We also saw the creation of app and also looked at the Mule app. So where we saw types of connectors available in Mule, mainly the application technology and custom connector using the SDK. So we also did a session on creating a new app, Mule app, and that's how you will create Mule flow, discrete operations you will configure, and then you can use that after you create the app and then publish that app or export that app, and then you'll import them. The rest of the options are similar to how you create the operations in the same way. Create app operations and then expose them in the designer. So this is what the overall what we saw in the creation. And we also saw the out of the box Mule apps, how easy to extend them. Like we gave the example of Active Directory, where you can add the operation because we have exposed the PowerShell utility there. So all the operations for Active Directory are used based on the PowerShell commands, so that you can use, take example, to get manager's name, get manager's detail. In the flow, you can just add and then get the output, map them, then use them to notify them, or all those operations can be done. Like I could able, that's what we did, share a list of what PowerShell commands to pull out various data to get a list of all unlocked accounts or disable accounts or inactive accounts, various options, various commands, PowerShell scripts are available. You can make use of them to create appropriate workflow in customer environment. So then we also saw about the service configuration. The service configuration is mainly used for the Mule app. So when you are creating the Mule operation, you would have specified in the AnyPoint Studio what configuration I would read from This is something similar to the instance details of the REST part. So in REST, we will configure them at the REST level only. Here we configure them in the service configuration so that you create the configurations. So currently it's only created from backend. We're soon looking at options to create them from the UI also, but to create them in the UI, you also need the ability to create new mule up so that you will be able to consume them in the system and then use the service configuration for that. So that's what we covered them in till now. And then today we're going to talk about the deployment architecture and then roadmap items. So Kishore, over to you.
Thanks, Prashna. Hi, everyone. Let me start sharing my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's start with deployment architecture. So different models that we have to support various scenarios. So let's talk about the deployment architecture that we have in SaaS. So if you see on the left side, so we have all the endpoint applications from where the automation workflows can be triggered, right? So from ISM or POP or ChangeGear for that matter, VSA, right? So and even from other applications or clients. So apart from that, since we have our portal, the automation portal is a web application, so you can so even the browser clients are also mentioned over here. So then, the next one, so you see the service-side hosting data center, which is on SaaS. So this is where the automation server or the whole automation product is deployed. So as you can see, so we have a API gateway which actually takes all the requests, all the API requests coming in from the clients through Nginx server, of course. So we have Nginx as a web server where we have also we have the portal UI application running. So the static files are also deployed over there. So it also acts as a web server which routes all the requests, all the API requests from external applications to API gateway. So from API gateway, we have service bus in the middle, which it actually helps us integrating or interacting with all other microservices we have in the backend. Okay. So we'll talk about one by one what actually this service really helps in solving all the automation use cases as a product. So so let's go one by one. So and all of these as you can see, so all of the microservices are interacted through JMS except except with Mule Run, which is a HTTP based integration, as you know. So we'll talk about that in a minute. So let's start from the top. The portal services, which has all the services, all the service or service logic or business logic for all the workflow management. So simply put, all the activities that you do on portal service to be it creating apps, operations, instances, or even configuring service configuration, creating on-prem registering or creating on-prem execution agents, or even creating the workflows and executing the workflows from the portal. So everything that you do on the portal service, so all those, especially the configuration aspects are actually available in portal services. The business logic of that, so API services is actually done through portal service. Then we have integration gateway. So the integration gateway is mainly to support the REST based connector. So we have today, so the integration gateway is one actually talks to the external systems when you make when the workflow has a service task with REST API involved. So the request goes through the go to the external systems via integration gateway. So that's the gateway to integrate with third-party systems. For now, we have REST connector. Of course, we're going to bring in SOAP connector, email connector, so all other connectors where the access or where the external systems are available through public via public network. So or via internet. So then we have trigger engine. So this is what is used when a workflow is triggered from external system or even automation portal UI for that matter. So any workflow execution request goes through trigger engine. So today it actually so the primary goal for trigger engine today, our primary responsibility is to validate the input parameters. I mean, whether they are matching the data types or all the validation constraints, meaning the input parameter validations are met as per what is defined in the workflow definition. So you can mark, I mean, you can configure, as you know, the workflow input parameters configured as input, I mean, required fields. Some of them can be optional, and you can put a pattern on how a parameter should be a value should be, and the min max length of the parameter. So you can define various validation constraints for each of the input parameters. So all of those validations are done in trigger engine. So before it hands off to process engine to really execute the workflow. So but eventually, I think we probably going to leverage trigger engine to do the pre-activities before we hand off the execution to the process engine. So then coming to the process engine. So process engine is the core engine. Uh, of course, we have, as we know, we are using Camunda as our orchestrator engine. So we wrap the Camunda engine and implement the BPMN services, so BPMN elements. Especially, for example, today we have a custom implementation of service task to integrate with the third-party application. So to be able to run REST or in mule operations through the service task. So that's what is done through processing. The whole orchestration is done through processing. So that's the core microservices out of all of them. So then, so the ones on the top you see on green, so are the new services introduced with the new designer and orchestrator being. So we have, as you can see here, we have a as compared to 1.0. So we had where we had orchestrator as Mule engine. So we were using leveraging Mule as an orchestrator engine. And developing the full-blown workflows within the uh, Mule Anypoint Studio and bringing them onto the Mule engine. But now, given 2.0, we have a native orchestrator engine and with the designer in place as a web designer in place. So those are the new services introduced. So then, so we as the bottom three where you have Mule workflow service, on-prem bridge, and Mule adapter. So these were already available, and we are continue to leverage those. So to especially continue to support the existing Mule workflows implemented for few of the customers. So that's what the first service, the Mule workflow service. So that is a legacy. That is continue to have the workflow execution management of the legacy Mule workflows. So we'll talk about on-prem bridge in a minute. But then we have Mule adapter. So though we are not really using Mule runtime as orchestrator engine for especially with our native orchestrator engine coming into the picture and the designer, we have our own designer. So we no longer will be using Mule as a orchestrator engine, but I think we still want to, as we discussed in the previous session, we still want to leverage the power of connectors or the repository of connectors that Mule has. so that we don't need to build them, build those connectors. We can just leverage them by creating those discrete operations as mule workflows, and expose them into our application. So that's where we still retain mule run, as you can see here. So mule adapter is what is used to interact with mule run. So we have created an adapter, which is of course was there in 1.x too. So we continue to leverage that to interact with mule run to execute the workflows as well as to collect the logs from mule run. So then we have mule run at the bottom, so which is the core orchestrator engine. Again, of course, I mean from 1.x perspective, but I think now we continue to leverage that to retain the power of connectors and support those connector operations. Okay, so then we have database. So where we have platform data, we use MySQL. So we're going to talk about the, of course, tech stack in a minute. So we have platform database, which has a dictionary of all the to manage all the customer databases, which we call it as tenant databases. Then we have Camunda database, so which actually which process engine here, which has a Camunda embedded inside it. So uses that Camunda database to uh, uh, maintain the state of the execution, workflow execution. So then we have mule logs database. So I mean, as we know, the discrete connector operations get executed in mule run, right? So in the last session we have seen that when you build discrete operation, so we recommended to have the logs correct. You can configure the logs, or you put logger statements within the discrete operation flow. So those logs, or even the some of the logs generated by Mule, will be captured into Mule logs database. And eventually, I think we want to bring those Mule logs for each of the discrete operation and show it on the our execution details trace log, so that so we can know what is really happening behind the scene, especially when workflow executes with the service task of type mule, right? So we need to know why, if there are some any errors, or so how that operation really got executed in mule run. So that's the whole architecture, deployment architecture on the SaaS side. Okay, so with this, so what you can actually solve the cases of having, I mean, any customers who are having their external or third party systems being on cloud. Okay, so now imagine a case where so we want to have the orchestrator or automation product in SaaS, but I think they have few systems like Active Directory, for example, as a best use case. So you want to execute operations on Active Directory like password reset or any user Active Directory operations, which is behind their on-prem network, behind the firewall of the customer, right? So that's when the right side architecture comes into the picture. So as you can see, so on the right side, you have on-premise customer network. So this is where we bring our on-prem agent or on-prem execution agent into the mix. So let's quickly talk about the architecture of the on-prem agent. So on-prem agent has a microservices based architecture, where we have mainly three services on the on-prem side. So you have tunnel server on the on-prem side, uh, where, I mean, when you install on-prem agent, execution agent on the on-prem network, so these are all the services that comes along with it. So you have tunnel server behind, again, all of this is behind the firewall. So you have tunnel server, which actually talks to the on-prem bridge on the cloud. Okay, so through a WebSocket mechanism. So you can see the WebSocket tunnel over here. So when the tunnel server comes up on the startup, it tries to establish a WebSocket connection to the on-prem bridge. Okay, and update so accordingly we also update the status on the cloud side. So for the respective on-prem agent, we show the status, whether it is running or stopped, or whether it is not even really deployed at, so that it can be managed the from cloud. So then, so now the tunnel server is what actually interacts with the cloud, right? So if you see from the diagram, so then you have service bus, and we have mule adapter again behind the service bus to execute the mule or connector operation. In this case, PowerShell operation, for example, for Active Directory case, which gets executed through mule run on the on-premise side. So then again, like cloud, we have a mule logs database also uh, on the on-prem agent side, so which actually helps in capturing the operation execution logs as we discussed described on the SaaS side. So for the same use case, so if the operation was running on the SaaS side to execute the discrete operation on the third party system which is accessible through cloud, so that's when the mule run on the cloud comes into the picture. But I think when you want to run an operation on the third party system, which is behind the customer on-premise network, behind the customer on-premise network, so that's when the mule run on the on-prem agent comes into the picture. I mean, that's where it actually the execution is taken over by the on-prem agent, especially mule run in this case, and execute onto the external services within the on-prem network, as you can see here. So like any VMware, right, or even Active Directory or any other third-party application which are running in the on-premise customer network, and captures those operation execution logs into the mule logs database in the on-premise side, which actually is periodically pulled from this database and push to the on-prem, sorry, to the cloud, so that we can visualize that log in the execution details. So, let me quickly talk about the other model that we have. Of course, I think so we have slightly touched upon the hybrid model, but we'll talk about the tech stack. And so as you can see, there is a standalone the whole automation product in SaaS, right? And which should be good enough to support the customers having all their the ecosystem of applications in accessible through cloud, right? But I think if we want, but again, I think if you have any if the customer has any applications which are running on I mean, behind the firewall, so the on-prem agent is the way to go. You can again have the hybrid of both. So meaning, I think you can have some applications running in cloud, you have some applications running behind the firewall. So I mean, from within a workflow, you can execute one operation on through the cloud. You can execute another operation which is actually behind the on the on-prem network. So apart from these two, we have, I mean, so another scenario where you can install the entire automation product in the on-premise network or customer on-premise network. So if some customer wants to have the whole automation product in their, not just the agent, the whole automation product, which is actually the left side one, right? So you can have the whole automation product running in their on-premise network. You can do it. So we're going to provide this is being I mean, the documentation is in progress. We're going to probably get the run book with all the installation instructions given, how this installation of whole automation product can be done. Entire automation product can be done in the on-premise network. So it should be more or less similar to what we do in SaaS. Okay. But I think we're going to share the minimum hardware requirements along with the runbook, especially considering, I think, I mean, assuming there might be, I mean, this we might be doing for a customer, and at least we're going to get them some indicative numbers as part of the documentation. So the technology stack, so which is again similar to, I mean, this since the entire automation product, the installation or deployment architecture of the whole automation product is same as what we do in SaaS versus on-premise. So the technology stack applies today. What are the technology stack we use uh, in SaaS? It is the same thing over here. So which is again applicable if we want to install. It doesn't matter where. I mean, it just the infrastructure is different. So so you have Mule Run. We use a community edition of Mule Run, of which is to 3.90 version of Mule Run. So this we don't package it from the licensing perspective. So it has to be installed separately. So which of course is a one-time activity though. So again, the instructions will be part of the run book. So we use MySQL Community Server 8017 version. So again, the same the packaging aspect is same for MySQL also. So we don't package it. So it has to be installed separately. Again, it is a one-time activity. Of course, though, if customer already has a MySQL running, MySQL 8 version is running, so we can they can even leverage too, by the way. So then all other services, as I described, I've shown here on the microservices. Those are all Spring Boot microservices where you have API gateway, service bus, the ITaaS service, which we are calling as the legacy Mule workflow execution management service. Then we have automation portal services, then trigger engine, process engine, integration gateway, Mule adapter, and on-prem which actually is one interacts with the on-prem agent, which acts as a bridge to communicate with the on-prem agent and back to the cloud. So then we have web server, which is we use Nginx 122 as a reverse proxy, which is also hosting the automation portal UI. So this is one of the scenario, and then we have the other scenario, as in fact we discussed while we were discussing on the deployment architecture. So where automation server is running on cloud and agent is installed on premise. So this is again same thing where the on-prem agent is used to execute the discrete Mule operations on the systems which are accessible through the on-premise network, which is behind the firewall of the customer network, right? Like the Active Directory or any PowerShells that you want to execute on the local servers of the customer network. So again, the installation instruction of the on-prem agent is so we are documenting. So we'll be providing that along with the customer-facing documentation. So how to install and to download and install the on-prem agent. Then we have minimum hardware requirements documented for, because I think since this is just an agent which will be executing on the discrete operations, not really full-blown workflows. So you want to have very bare minimum requirements of one core CPU, 4 GB memory, and 50 GB of hard disk. Then again, I think the microservices we have are Docker based and which are built on CentOS 7 or RHEL 7. So then again, the installed software, which of course will have to be installing separately, a few of them, and so and through our deployment scripts, we build our microservices or deploy our microservices. So the technology stack is same, but except that we have only few services running on the on-prem agent, part of on-prem agent. So Mule Run, again, the same version. So it has to be packaged and installed separately. MySQL server, same thing with MySQL server. So then we have three microservices, which are service bus, tunneling server, and Mule adapter ultimately to execute the operations on-premise. It actually does three things, mainly to deploy the apps. So whenever, as we discussed earlier, to execute the Mule connectors, so you have to the apps that we developed has to be deployed in one of the execution agents, if you remember. So that execution agent can be the one which is inbuilt on the SaaS installation, or the on-prem agent that we are just describing. So to execute those operations on the on-premise network. So that is the first step, right? So to deploy those apps, so you're going to deploy those apps through the agent on the mule run, which is running on the on-premise network. So that's the second responsibility, is to execute those operations, right? So on the mule run through mule run, sorry. So ultimately we and mule adapter is the one which actually used to interact with mule run to execute those operations. So then the logs, so whenever those operations are executed, the logs are collected into the logs database we have seen, and those logs data is periodically synced to the cloud, so which is what the responsibility of mule adapter mainly. And all the communication, of course, to the cloud happens through tunneling server. So via the secure WebSocket connection, which is the on-prem bridge and cloud. So there is one thing that I just want to specifically mention. So apart from the WebSocket connection, so you can see your dotted red line over here from which is coming out of Mule adapter, going all the way up to the API gateway on the, of course, through Nginx though, through to the cloud. So this is mainly, so this is a outbound call. So a Mule adapter is going to so especially whenever we deploy apps, we don't want to send those app packages via the WebSocket tunnel because of the restrictions on the size of the data that can pass through WebSocket. So in those cases, we try to notify whenever an app needs to be deployed on the on-prem agent Mule run. So we notify to the on-prem network or agent. So in which case, the Mule adapter is going to pull that resource using the HTTP or REST API and deploy that app into the Mule run on the agent on the on-prem agent side. So that's where you see the connection from Mule adapter using HTTP protocol to API gateway. So those are the different models that we have. So just to recap, so we can install the entire automation product in on-prem network. So of course, sorry, I think the whole automation is available as a SaaS service in SaaS, which is what you have seen, for example, in the demo environment, or even it will be matter for that matter, we're going to have production. So where the customers having uh, the access to the third-party system via internet. So those integrations can be achieved, or those processes can be built and done through without any on-prem agent into the picture. So now in extension to that, so if we have any if the customer has any services running on the on-prem network, behind the on-prem network, so they can install the agent and serve those applications in through the on-prem agent. So then the third one is the on-prem installation of whole entire automation product, so which is also again possible. So let me stop here for a moment before I talk about the roadmap items. So to take any questions on the deployment architecture. Okay.
No questions. Okay. Good.
Anything specifically, Prasanna or Chandra, anybody wants to add anything before we talk about roadmap items?
Nothing in specific. I think we can
Okay.
go with the roadmap items.
Okay. So given where we are right now, so we have of course created our first version of the designer with our native orchestrator in place. So we have, of course, I think a lot of things to do to make it have to support the business processes, enterprise level business processes. So we want to talk about and how we elegantly we can manage the workflow process, developing the enterprise level workflow processes. So first thing I think we want to probably, I mean, these things probably may not be in the order of priority, but I think this overall roadmap of how where we want to take this product to. So we want to integrate. So in the current version, we have integrated automation with Luma VSA. So especially to execute, to be able to execute the workflows from as part of the skill conversation flow. But of course, we still have some another part of the integration to be done where we want to seamlessly launch the designer from within the VSA so that especially for the developer, it will be easy to avoid logging into multiple applications. So apart from that, we want to integrate the automation into other service-side portfolio application, especially ChangeGear, POB, and ISM. So of course, we have automation integrated with ISM, but with a 1.x version of the legacy workflows were integrated, but we want to change it to have the use the designer workflows also to be integrated with ISM and ChangeGear and POB too. So then we want to bring in the version control repository, I mean, especially versioning and the lifecycle management of the workflows. So with the capability of viewing the revision history and looking at the change log of what happened. Uh, uh, so what it means is today the workflow. So what we have right now, you create a workflow and you have to save. You have to connect. I mean, you can't really create a workflow in stages. So of course you can do, but you'll have to save and connect all the dots, right, and make sure all the validations are passed. And uh, and before you execute, you have to ensure everything is available. So, uh, but I think what we want to bring in is to have the ability to draft the workflow, meaning I think where of course we can have it's kind of a planning phase where uh, you might be planning and not having the whole process in mind, but you might be doing it in stages. So you can draft the workflow, test the workflow without really maybe doing the whole the process in picture, right? So you can test it and then you can publish it whenever you think, but you can go as many iterations as you want to continue drafting that uh, and then finally publish whenever you think a version of this workflow is ready to be available, right? Or integrate with the ecosystem, then you can publish that workflow and then which is available for execution. So then after it is available for execution or it is already available in production, for example, so you want to make changes to that workflow or add bring in more services into the process, right, or more scenarios into the process. So then you can check out the workflow without impacting uh, the the published version. So what it means is we're going to have more multiple versions of the workflow to be able to continue making changes while the workflow is being executed on the previous versions that were published. So then you can continue to check out it to edit for editing and then test it. So once you are good, again, you can publish and which is ready to execute from now onwards. This is the version that will be available for execution. So then, so this can go on. So the life cycle of this workflow can go on until probably decide you no longer need that workflow. Then you can even retire. So that's the versioning that we want to bring in with the life cycle of you can manage we ought this all will be built in, so you don't really need to worry about the managing the version. So it will be provided out of the box, and and you can even view the history of those versions available. So then the more important thing to be able to have the product to the enterprise level of automation. So two is to support more BPMN elements. Okay, so we have today, as you have seen, service task, gateways, script task, uh, and error, and those are the main tasks. And then you have uh, yeah, you have event as a boundary event. So, but BPMN has more more tasks to be supported, like user task, receive, send and receive task. So then there are task makers which can be used to loop the workflows, or then you have other gateways. Today, what we have is exclusive gateway. You have then an inclusive gateway, parallel gateway to be able to support a different use cases, I mean, especially the parallel where you can run the processes in parallel or concurrently. So then you have events, more events. Uh, I mean, maybe I think like timer events where you can probably schedule a workflow or uh, wait for a pizza to be delivered, for example, right within the process, and take alternative paths when it is not delivered within, or you can do escalations, for example, based on the time. So then you have sub processes. So which is again, of course, which you can be used to invoke other processes, or you having sub processes within the main process. So these are the when there are more BPMN elements which needs to be supported to be able to have to be able to support not just IT use cases, but I think enterprise level use cases. So then we're going to have scheduling of workflows. So you can schedule the workflows to especially do to the batch jobs periodically. Then we're going to give more control on workflow execution. So today, when the workflow is in motion, you can view the logs though how it is working. But I think we're going to bring in the ability to pause a workflow execution, and maybe activate and then terminate too. For example, this can be applicable even for a test execution, or even a real execution. Then we're going to have integrated workflow import and export support. So with 2.0, we have support for APIs to the export and import. So we're going to bring in the UI, and where you can export the workflows from one customer, and or from, for that matter, one environment to another environment, and you can view the imports, I mean import status as well. So then we're going to have uh, attachment support. So the use cases for attachment support are probably where so you want to transfer the files from one system to another system. I mean, maybe a simple use case can be, so whenever you want to probably uh, uh, ticket from ISM or any ITSM system into another system, right? For example, in Salesforce, and you want to bring in the attachments too along with it. So also we probably want to transfer an attachment to a FTP location, for example. So that's what the attachment support is going to bring in. So then we're going to have more automation more content pack, especially we're going to have pre-built library of connectors, of course, especially SOAP, email, and remote SSH, SFTP, then more and more application connectors. So of course, these are, some of them are protocol connectors, as we discussed, because some of them will be application connectors. So we're going to have maybe ITSM content, ITSM specific content also we're going to bring in. So then, apart from the connectors and apps, we're going to have catalog workflows to be able to demonstrate a standard use cases maybe. Uh, so then, so that's the content pack. So this is, of course, will be ongoing activity. So So as much as possible, we want to give out of the box, right? Any connector for that matter, be it a REST connector or a REST based app or a mule based app. So then we're going to have enhanced troubleshooting, so that and tracing information, so that it will be easy for everyone to debug and troubleshoot the issues during the workflow execution. So it will be, which should be helpful in making the implementation faster. So in the similar lines, we're going to bring in more user experience related enhancements. So which again should help the implementation faster and reduce the cost of implementation from that perspective. So we're going to have archiving and patching. I mean, this is being we're going to have a lot of data getting accumulated through the execution. So there's a lot of history is going to get accumulated. So we need to think through the archiving and patching tech, archiving and purging related activities we have to bring in at some point of time. So those strategies has to be rolled out.
Right.
So then if we're going to have user and role management, so and of course the permit with the permissions model. So finally, we're going to have the KPIs, dashboards, and reports. So this is the so we, of course, this all need to be discussed and see what are the KPIs really make sense for automation, and then have dashboards and reports on top of it.
Right.
So
this is not in the same order, not in the priority order, but these are some of the items which are considered for the future releases. So any feedback on this or anything else you wanted to have then? So any questions on the complete automation? I think today is the last final day of the session. All 5 sessions be completed. Any questions, any feedback? So this deck can then complete the other recordings anyway. Recordings are available. I'll also share this deck. It would be useful. So if there is no question, probably I'll stop the recording. We can continue to have questions separately.
Yeah, Prasanna,